Welcome everyone to today's program. Let us vote an artist intervention. My name is Ellen Alvord and I am the museum's Associate Director for Engagement and Weatherby Curator of Academic Programs, and I use she, her pronouns. I'm delighted to introduce today's artist conversation between Aram Han Sifuentes and Lisa Iglesias. My museum colleagues and I feel fortunate to have had Lisa Iglesias join the art faculty here at Mount Holyoke College this fall and to have initiated this incredible collaboration. Prior to Lisa joining the Mount Holyoke faculty as Associate Professor of Art this year, she most recently taught and served as Studio Director of Graduate Studies at the University of Florida in Gainesville. Originally from Queens, New York, Lisa is an interdisciplinary artist whose individual research practice is rooted in drawing and painting. She also works in a collaborative mode of making with her sister, Janelle Iglesias, who is an assistant professor of art at the University of California, San Diego. We are deeply grateful to Lisa for bringing the exciting and powerful work of Aram Han Sifuentes to our attention, and we are delighted to have her serve as the host for today's program. Lisa, I turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Ellen. It's really wonderful to be here. Welcome to Let Us Vote, an artist intervention. We're honored to welcome Aram Han Sifuentes to Mount Holyoke College. I'm Associate Professor of Art, Lisa Iglesias. This event is co-sponsored by the Mount Holyoke College Art Museum, the Studio Art Department, the McCulloch Center for Global Initiatives, and MHC Votes. Special thanks to Tricia Pike, Ellen Alvord, Abigail Hoover, and Nina Frank. Many thanks to Aram and to all of you for joining us today. Aram Han Sifuentes is a fiber and social practice artist who works to claim spaces for immigrant and disenfranchised communities. Her work often revolves around skill sharing, specifically sewing techniques, to create multi-ethnic and intergenerational sewing circles, which become a place for empowerment, subversion, and protest. Solo exhibitions of her work have been exhibited at Jane Addams Hull House Museum, Hyde Park Art Center, Chicago Cultural Center, Asian Arts Initiative, Table Art Center, University Galleries at Illinois State University, and Pulitzer Arts Foundation. Her solo exhibition, Talking Back to Power, is currently at the Skirball Cultural Center. Aram is a 2016 Smithsonian Artist Research Fellow, a 2016 Three Arts Awardee, a 2017 Sustainable Arts Foundation Awardee, and a 2020 MAP Fund grantee. Her project, Protest Banner Lending Library, was a finalist for the Beasley Design Awards at the Design Museum in 2016. She earned her BA in Art and Latin American Studies from the University of California, Berkeley, and her MFA in Fiber and Material Studies from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. She is currently an associate professor, adjunct at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago and the 2020-2021 Artist in Residence at Loyola University in Chicago. Aram Han Sifuentes' project, The Official Unofficial Voting Station, asks the question, what would voting look like if it were available and too accessible to those who can't legally vote? An estimated 92 million adults cannot vote in presidential elections because of citizenship status, felony disenfranchisement, or because they reside in a US territory, while others are cut out of the process for reasons such as lack of proper identification or they've been purged from the voter registration rolls. We're privileged to welcome artist Aram Han Sifuentes to talk about how she has been re-envisioning the voting process in her acclaimed and ongoing collective art project, The Official Unofficial Voting Station, Voting for All Who Legally Can't. This collaborative initiative aims to spark imaginative voting stations across the country that become sites for social engagement and discussion. And we're really honored to have this project be present at Mount Holyoke College. Thanks so much for joining us, Aram. It's really exciting to have you here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, it's so good to see you.
It's good to see you too, and it's good to share space with you. And I've so been looking forward to this conversation. So I thought that we would just kind of wander through some conversations and questions and learn more about your process and practice and the project. And I thought that we could start out by talking about this specific project that we're talking about today. And if you can speak to the disenfranchisement that's happening in the presidential election and any of the kind of details that you'd like to share about the project.
Yeah, thank you so much. I will jump into a quick part of this PowerPoint to go over who can't legally vote in the United States. And I was mentioning to Lisa earlier that I attended this presentation with like scholars who knew all this information about the evolution of voting rights in the United States. And when I asked them the question, do you know who currently can't legally vote, and they could not answer the question, right? And so yeah, I started this project in 2016, and it really started from there in terms of I couldn't vote during that election because I wasn't a citizen. And so you oftentimes, or I would oftentimes on the media just hear people talk about the disenfranchised and not really understanding who that was or how big this population was or is. So then I started looking into who can't legally vote, and and a big part of this project is sharing that information, because actually throughout the years of researching it has been really difficult to find those numbers and to find the specifics. And also this is part of why I don't really have an updated number for the 2020 elections in terms of how big the disenfranchised are for this election. And when I started this project in 2016, I didn't have a concrete number till after the elections. And so I want to share this part in terms of this presentation showing who can't legally vote. Who can't legally vote in the United States during the presidential elections. So also, I just want to point out that this PowerPoint is meant to be educational, or this part of the PowerPoint, and I have it available on the online site, which is officialunofficial.vote. So I use the word disenfranchised, and I like to define that word, right? So deprived of some right, privilege, or immunity. And specifically, I'm talking about deprived of the right to vote. And so this is a graphic that me and a collaborator, Ishita Jarap, we have we make kitschy stickers and zines and things like that. And so we call ourselves Cute Rage Press. And so when I was looking for graphics to share who can't legally vote, and we couldn't find them. So we ended up making our own for this project. So the first largest group is youth under 18, and that being about 70 million people. So that is the majority of people who can't legally vote. And then the second largest group are non-citizens, of course, including those who are undocumented. And then the third largest group, this is where it gets muddy very quickly, because it all depends on state laws, and each state has, their own very specific laws. So in 2016, the Sentencing Project estimated that 6.1 million people couldn't legally vote because they were either incarcerated or formerly incarcerated. Actually, the Sentencing Project just updated the number early this week, and they estimate that now the number is down to about 5.1 million, or just over 5 million. So this breaks it down a little bit more closely, right? So if you are incarcerated in Maine or Vermont, you are still legally given the right to vote, right, via mail. In 18 states, if you are in prison, you can't vote, you lose your right to vote, but as soon as you come out, you regain your right. So Illinois is there, right, where I reside in Chicago, and Massachusetts is there as well, right? So in 3 states, people can legally vote or cannot legally vote if in prison or on parole. And then 17 states is prison, parole, probation. And then in 11 states, the laws are much stricter. In some of these states, you lose your right to vote forever. So in Kentucky, the governor is the only one who could restore your voting rights, right? Anyone convicted of a felony in Virginia automatically loses their civil rights, the right to vote, serve on a jury, run for office, become a notary public, and carry a firearm. So the Constitution of Virginia gives the governor the sole discretion to restore civil rights, not including firearm rights. And so why the number has gotten down by about 1 million is because there has been a bunch of concerted efforts in states where governors have given clemency power to residents to give them the right to vote. So felony disenfranchisement policies disproportionately impact communities of color, particularly brown and Black communities. And as of 2016, in 4 states, Florida, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Virginia, more than 1 in 5 Black adults were disenfranchised. In total, 2.2 million Black citizens are banned from voting from just those 4 states, right? Which is astronomical number. So the 4th largest disenfranchised community are residents of US territories. So people born in Guam, the Virgin Islands, the Northern Mariana Islands, American Samoa, and Puerto Ricans are all Americans. They vote in the US congressional elections and the presidential primaries, but Americans born in these territories can't vote for president, not unless they moved to the mainland, except for American Samoans who are not US citizens. They're just considered US nationals. And then the 5th largest group are, depending on your state laws again, and depending on what sort of required ID you need to vote, if you don't have access or you don't have those IDs, then you are disenfranchised for this reason. And this is why there's that common understanding, or that unhoused people or people experiencing homelessness can't legally vote or register to vote. And that's actually not true, because you can register to vote in all 50 states without an address. You can put in an address of a shelter or a park or even an intersection. But because if obviously they live in a state that requires very strict ID and you need a permanent address to get that ID, then you can't legally vote for that reason. But actually, unhoused people are not on this list because they technically, right, can vote. And so this data from the US Election Project estimated that 28.6% of the population was ineligible to vote in 2016. So that is 92 million people. And like I said, we don't know the exact updated number due to constant changing of laws. And this list and percentage does not even address voter suppression. So this is another graphic that Ishita and I made, combining the list of who can't vote with that data that we have from the election project.
Aram, can you speak a bit to the process of the research that was necessary to create these numbers and statistics and to reveal all of this information, and then to have that data be available and to be able to collaborate with folks and create these educational materials and artworks? Yeah, how did you go about this, your research?
Yeah, just constantly going down a ton of wormholes and trying to find as much information as possible. And like I said, finding some really key resources like the Sentencing Project being really key to understanding, how large the disenfranchised population is that are incarcerated and formerly incarcerated. And yeah, but the research, like I said, is constantly evolving. And so that is also something difficult to pin down in terms of, like I said, not having an updated number for 2020 is because of these constantly changing laws, right?
Right. And so the statistics and the educational component is such a huge force of the origination of the project, and such a huge element of how the project operates and exists. Can you speak to and describe the other aspects of the project and the symbolic aspects, the ephemera and the tactile haptic aspects of the official and unofficial voting station?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the very base, making it an educational project is really important for me. I mean, first of all, because I am an educator myself, but a lot of my works are pedagogical, right? And we have to understand who can't legally vote to able to take action and to become aware of this population, right? And so that is why in these presentations is really key for me to talk about this. It is key for me to make this PowerPoint downloadable so that educators, right, and we have shared this widely with high school teachers and elementary school teachers so that they're able to download this and present it to their students, right? Yeah, so and then a big part of this project are the ephemera and the kit, right? So for the 2020 election, I created 50 voting kits for the disenfranchised. And so these are let me share some images here of this. So these kits are full of objects made by myself and various collaborators. So when I did this project in 2016, about 15 artists, activists, organizers, and organizations activated their own voting stations. And when that happened, we sort of like, and when I say we, it was me and the Jane Addams Hull House Museum, which I worked with for this project, and who commissioned the project. We shipped out ballots in a ballot box. And so I was thinking about that act of like, that we just like were able to ship out these ballots and we're like, go make your own stations. And so thinking about that and wanting to do it more large scale this time, and also a more accessible project where anyone can request their kits to make their own state, activate their own voting stations. So in the kits, and I worked like the last 2 years to develop these kits, you know, and to like also like work on grants and funding so that I can make it truly accessible, right? So anyone who requests a kit, you know, I pay for everything and you get to keep everything, right? So, and obviously asking a bunch of artists to make different parts to be able to pay them for their work, right? So it has a ballot box, and it has ballots, 2 ballots, a presidential candidate ballot and then an issues ballot. And we also made these, printed them in 4 different languages, but online we made it 8 different languages. So Cute Rage Press, me and Ishita created voting stickers for all. So they're these cute stickers that say voting for all, or I want to vote, or let us vote, right? And then a collective here, Undocumented Projects, created these wristbands that says, if we could vote, we would. Thinking about how, you know, when, for people who can legally vote, they're given a sticker or a wristband after they do vote. And, you know, for the disenfranchised, we don't get those, but it's not just these objects, it's the symbols behind these objects, right? Because like after people vote, they take selfies with those wristbands or stickers and wear them with pride, right? So we want to make these stickers and wristbands that also could be these symbols, right? And me and Erin Delaney, who's an artist and organizer here in Chicago, made a sort of list of actions to expand voting rights. Sadie Woods created a playlist for the voting station. So this is a vinyl record, and there's also a USB, so you could pick one. And it's called Party is Protest. So she compiled a bunch of songs from Chicago artists and musicians and created this, and all the songs are political and protest songs, right, in a way. And so she created this DJ compilation of those. And then here are the graphics that me and Ishita created to share that information. And then William Estrada, who's an awesome arts educator and artist, he screen printed these posters. They vote for our futures, for our children, for our community, for those who can't, in 8 different languages. So I put 2 in the kits, and then others by request. And then my other project, Protest Banner Lending Library, which I've been doing since 2016. I've been making protest banners nonstop, as you can imagine, since then. And so, of course, I had to make protest banners or banners a part of the project. So, of course, the Let Us Vote is more of a protest banner, right? And then the official, unofficial voting station, sort of as a place marker, so people can know about the project, right? Oh yeah, so that's the idea, that with these kits, people can activate their own voting stations and it's really a starting point so people can like really make it what they need to make it in order to, you know, collect the votes from people who can't legally vote as the priority. Yeah.
And you mentioned that this year that there are 50 kits and that they're being activated in various ways across the country and in Mexico as well. and the project is being activated here on Mount Holyoke campus. So if you find yourself near South Hadley, or if you're a student that is on campus, you can see 2 different stations where we have ephemera and objects from the kit that are on view at the community center and in the lobby of the Art Museum here at Mount Holyoke College. Can you speak to some of the other partnerships that you have this year and where the project is being activated with some of your other collaborators this year?
Yeah, so as of now, there's only about 1 or 2 kits left. So that, I mean, obviously I've been working on this for like 2 years. And then with the pandemic, I was like, wow, like no one's gonna want these kits, right? So I was like pretty worried in the beginning. So to be able to have 48, 49 out there in the world, it's pretty incredible. Yeah, so a lot of educators have requested them to activate them and use in their classrooms. And so a couple people here, some educators here for like an after school art program, developed an entire curriculum around the voting stations. And, you know, it's specifically looking at, because it's taking place through the Veterans Museum. So like looking at veterans who don't have legal status and who can't legally vote, right? Which is also a community of people where there's a lot of misunderstanding, right? We automatically assume veterans can vote, but that's not true, right? So that's been really interesting that people have been using it to like develop an entire curriculum. You know, I just with the artist here, Sarah Ross, who does a lot of work inside Stateville Correctional Center, we actually have been working together to mail the ballots into Stateville Correctional Center, and hopefully, you know, to the incarcerated population, hopefully will be able to, you know, send these back to us, right? And so we can have access in that sort of way. And then some of the art sort of installations and activations have been happening as well. So I could show a couple of those. So in the presentation, I have a couple examples. So this is through Mural Arts Philadelphia. So also using it primarily with their education programs. So they created this standalone voting station structure in Love Park. And then I visited a class that was making their own posters and their own materials and artwork that highlight histories of voting rights suppression and advocacy. So that's up right now. And then this was a station that I took on at an event called Family Affairs, which is for the Wide Awake Chicago. That happened on October 3rd, that, you know, happened alongside voter registration and live music with DJ Sadie Woods playing music, and you know, on-site COVID testing and on-site HIV testing, which was really great. And my friend and artist in LA, Carol Zoe, she you know, turned her storage compartment in the back of her motorcycle into a ballot box and is driving around collecting symbolic votes and distributing information about voter suppression, disenfranchisement, and defunding police in Los Angeles. Yeah. And so those are the different sort of activations that are happening at this very moment. And of course, as you mentioned, your activation as well. So
yeah, it's taking, I think that's one of the elements that there's so many various elements and qualities of this project that are both physical and philosophical, and that the fact that that collaboration plays such a strong role in that the project can shift and evolve depending on how it's being activated. It's this living project, and it really reflects the community in which it's taking place. And with that, there's so many philosophies and politics and physical gestures that weave this project in with your other projects. Can you speak to some of the threads, pun intended, that connect throughout your various projects, because you're very much an interdisciplinary artist, and you work with many different materials and with many different communities. And if you could maybe just speak to the various sort of through lines that you see throughout all of your work.
Yeah. I mean, for me, the starting point and the communities I engage most with my practice are non-citizen immigrant communities, predominantly of color, right? And so I've done projects in the past, and one thing is like my projects are never ending, right? Is that I do a project called the US Citizenship Test Sampler, where non-citizens come together and sew the citizenship test as a way of learning the test, but we also sell the samplers for the cost of applying for citizenship, which currently is $725, but actually October 2nd, it was supposed to go up 60% to $1,170, but there's some dispute around that at the moment in the courts. And so yeah, so it becomes a way to like make money from the work and also support people to hopefully get their citizenship, even though it's not a requirement of the project. And so I've been doing that since 2013. And then, as mentioned before, in 2016, I started the Protest Banner Lending Library, where I teach people how to make their own protest banners. And then there's various lending libraries of them in different cities all over the US and Canada, where it's a physical lending library. So you can come and check out any of the banners, use it, and then return them once you're done using them. And so like the workshop components are really important for me in terms of skill sharing, in terms of art making, in terms of, because, one thing I like to point out is that in Euro-Western cultures, art making is a collective activity, right? And so, and also, yeah, particularly with the protest banners, giving, sharing that skill with other people so that that can continue, because obviously the efforts of protest and rebellion needs to be, wide spread and continue in that sort of way. So yeah.
Yeah, and to speak to that collectivity, that's something that strikes me so much about your work, is this collective, collaborative philosophy, how it plays a role in your work. And when you were first sort of forging some of these early projects, was collaboration already kind of designed into your thought process, or was collectivity and collaboration, did that sort of rise later?
I don't know. I think like a lot of it's based on my personality too, because I'm like such an extrovert. And I don't like doing anything by myself. Right? But I think and with like as an artist, I'm so used to doing things my way, right? In terms of skills, in terms of narratives, in terms of all of it, right? And so for me, collaborations are just so exciting because I learned so much about myself. I learned so much about, the world through collaboration. I'm able to push myself. My collaborators push me in different ways, and so like that dialogue is super important. And also in terms of, making political work and making work about, the disenfranchised, like I don't have access to all the communities that I want to be able to engage with this work, right? But I definitely don't want to also like show up and be like, okay, now I'm here, like so that's also why collaborations are so important for me, is because, I'm building and also sharing, my networks and the places and people I have access to, and also building upon, the communities that my collaborators have access to, and being able to create work together and sort of forge more of coalitions, right? And so that, for me, that's why collaborations are so important.
Yeah, there's such a power, it like on multiple levels. It challenges and troubles this idea of the lone male genius, hermit in the studio, and this kind of quest for an equitable democracy it's necessary to have collective efforts. And so it's beautiful how the very stuff that makes your projects is it's laid in and designed in every step along the way. As is, as we mentioned before, you being an interdisciplinary artist, much of our audience today is also committed to or otherwise deeply involved in an interdisciplinary liberal arts model of education. And so could you speak to the ways in which art in general or an interdisciplinary social practice orientation can contribute to social change? Because I think that's a lot of the background of our audience and the people who are either live today or will be kind of logging in as the recording is available on the museum website later. As interdisciplinary liberal arts minded students and educators and community members, how might we think about sort of our roles, the relationship between cultural production and social change?
Yeah, I get asked this all the time, and I wrote a text about it recently, not yet published, and yeah, and I give lectures about this, or the whole artist talk is framed around how can art contribute to social change? Because yeah, I get confronted over the years all the time with that sort of attitude, right? That art isn't good enough, or art can't create change, or yeah, and I think and I really argue against that, or I push back against that, because I think art is so powerful in so many ways. And so some of the ways that it can create change, particularly for those I think who are marginalized to create art, right, is the power of storytelling, right? That's one, is that we get to tell our own stories and on our own terms, right? We get to center ourselves in that kind of way and center our own experiences. And I think why those things are so important is because so many things in the world is defined by whiteness. And so through culture making, we're able to define ourselves, and there's not many opportunities for us to actually do that. I love art because, or one of the favorite ways I use art is to push back against power, right? To talk back to power, right? Whether it is through protest banners, or can be aggressive and direct in that kind of way, but it can also through subversion, right? You can start to question and push against those cracks to rupture, and particularly working with non-citizen immigrant communities or those who are disenfranchised, like working with people who don't often get to talk back to power, right? Without fear, right? And so that is really important for me, and really important, I think, in what art can do. And then, like I said, sharing it, for me, the workshops are really important because it's also this really nourishing, beautiful space where we're able to collectively come together and share our experiences with one another, right? And share our own cultural and community knowledge with one another, right? And so for me, personally, the workshops give me a lot of, nourish me in a lot of ways, right? And so that's also another way I think that's art is so powerful. It's also a pathway to healing, and we know that, and when so many of our pathways to healing are cut off from us, made inaccessible or corporatized, right? It's art is really actually it can be inaccessible, but the act of making art, is pretty accessible, right? And for us to do that in our everyday to heal is really important. And we only just sort of understand some of the ways that art can heal, but I don't think we really understand all of it yet, And I think the main way I would answer your question is that we can't forget that action is tied to imagination, right? That, art is the language of imagination, right? We could reimagine new worlds. And that's what I really try to do with my projects, right? Like in terms of what can voting look like if it were made accessible and available to everybody as society says it is, right? As power says it is. And so imagination is so key to recreating worlds and for us to sort of see that, experience that, and then it's really up to us whether we try to make that a part of our everyday, right? So imagination is the seed for action, right? In the indignation for the way things are, and then imagination for the ways things can be. And that's what creates social change, right?
Yeah.
Collectively can imagine something different.
I think often when I think of your practice about your undergraduate, what your undergraduate experience must have been like at Berkeley when you were studying Latin American studies and a combination of Latin American studies and studio, and how some of the forces that you're talking about in terms of agency and access and change and creativity and imagination were so actively fermenting and intersecting and colliding at that point as well.
Yeah, because I was studying Latin American studies mainly because I thought I was going to be an immigration lawyer. Because like immigration has always been like super of interest to me, and where yeah, so I've always been interested in immigration policy and studying that. And what really enticed me to become an artist was first the sense of community, right? Yeah, and then seeing different sort of social practices, actually. In particular, one of my mentors was Aaron Toole, who's a veteran, and he throws cups and puts war images on them and gives them away for free, right? He's given, I recently talked to him, so I know this number, but 22,000 away. you know and so this idea that by giving them away, people are bringing these cups home and being reminded of war and having a more intimate relationship with war every day. And like seeing practices like that, really, for me, there's just so much power in those gestures, and I think we don't talk about that sort of enough as a society, that, and as artists, right, that these gestures can be profoundly powerful. And so seeing that and seeing how these practices can create these sort of dialogues, or not create, but like be catalysts for a lot of these dialogues. And I could see practices of arts being sort of pushing the boundaries of art, and in terms of like, there are some things that define what art can be, but there's actually a lot of space to like push on that as well. And so I was really enticed by that like, you can sort of create different ways of, I don't know, right? Like with this project too, like I could create things that I want to see in the world, and so that's really what drew me to art. Yeah. And I was like super politically active at Berkeley, like a cliche Berkeley student. And and I laugh about that all the time, actually, recently, that like I feel like so many of my art making skills come from those days of like, campaigning and protesting, and that like
Yep, life skills.
those were like my art making skills. I didn't even know it.
Well, we have a couple of questions from the Q&A I'd like to share with you. The first question is if you would be able to show some of the images of your banners, maybe if it's in your presentation, or you could even bring us to your website or Instagram, and you could maybe, or if you have a repository of some of your favorite protest banner.
Yeah, I could definitely pull that up. Let me
Nice.
just give me a second. So.
Yeah. And actually, maybe as you're looking, I'll tell you what the other question is, because maybe the two might intersect. What is the most surprising outcome you have had from your different social practice projects? I remember someone asking a great question at the University of Florida when you were talking about the protest banner lending library, and there being a really beautiful conversation about surprises with some of the participants. So maybe those two could go together, or and then it might lead to some of the other project surprises as well.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of surprises within these projects. Definitely, yeah, because you could create the sort of structure and the frame for them, but when they go out, sort of, when people participate, it becomes a sort of different thing, and you can only sort of predict so much, right?
Yeah.
Let me show some of these banners. Yeah, with the protest banners, one of the surprising elements of them was, so I made these thinking that they would get used for protest marches and political actions. But one thing that surprised me was how many people check them out for other reasons, right? To be used in conferences. And this photo here is Free Street Theater, and they borrowed banners for their youth production, right? So yeah, they get checked out in so many different ways, to use at performances, retreats, exhibitions, schools, classrooms, fundraiser events, parties. A student group at SAIC checked them out to use as like picnic blankets, part of their like discussion around picnic blankets. Some people told me that they just put them up in their rooms. And I think another thing that sort of surprised me was, in the beginning, I didn't know, by making it a lending library and not having sort of limitations on space, time, or not space, but like the amount of time people could check them out, or there's no time limit, there's no cost of checking them out. And I did that very early on in the project. I was actually surprised that people are really good at returning the banners to the library, right? Because I didn't necessarily know that would happen. And if you're like me and you're really bad at returning books back to the library, right? But like, yeah, people are really amazing about returning books to the library. With this project, the protest banner, I mean, the official, unofficial voting stations, like, I think so. I get so surprised by the various activations of them, because like so many people think of using them in, such creative and powerful ways. And some things that, I think about a lot these days is the power of gestures, like I was speaking of. And so there's so many times where I've activated the kits or taken them out in the world, and people will just spend so much time and care into casting their vote. And then, people will be like, oh, I've never voted before. That was so interesting and powerful to be able to vote. And I'm like, it's symbolic. You're not actually voting, but like the sort of gesture of that, and to be able to, like, I don't know, I've been thinking a lot about that, and that surprises me a lot in terms of how people feel the project, or how people are able to, like, the sort of that moment of like, I cast my vote, like I'm putting my input out there into the world, even if it's symbolic,
Symbolic gesture, like you were saying, can feed you, can be part of that kind of stamina, feeding, or enlivening and rejuvenation, and it can be part of that process of keeping on going.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, we're reaching towards the end of our time. I wanted to take a moment to ask you, Aram, if you have any projects that are out in the world that you'd like to share with us.
At the beginning of the pandemic, accessibility of this project, I envisioned would be difficult. And so me and a collaborator, John Satram, we created the official unofficial.vote. And it's the website is really exciting for me, because I've never created a website or like a web participatory, project before. And so you could vote on 8 different languages. And you can access a bunch of the different objects that the collaborators made for the kit, but we just like digitize them, right? So like some of them were really easy, like William's posters, you could download and print your own. But you know, the voting stickers, John created a Instagram filter, so you could take a selfie with the sticker above your head and you could pick the one you want, or take a video and scroll through them. And yeah, the PowerPoint and more curriculum is on there that William and I developed, and fun things like crossword puzzles and word searches and things like that. And it's also a place where you can view the votes, which I think is really interesting. So you can actually scroll through people's answers, and one of the questions is, I am voting here because, and so you could view people's answers, and it's pretty powerful. So that is exciting. And oh yeah, and then I want to also share the Skirball, that link that we have for you there, which I'll put again. The Skirball, you could, with that site, you could request your own like little envelope of stuff from the voting station, so for free. So if you go to that site, you can get a wristband and sticker and a poster that folds out and things like that. So you should get one. And in terms of, you know, other projects, like I said, my projects are sort of never ending, you know, so I am still doing the citizenship test samplers. I am doing the Protest Banner lending library, and depending on, you know, who wins, like that could be very active again.
I was going to ask you, where do you plan to be on election night and the day after and the day after? Like, do you have a plan for how to process that vote and the afterwards?
Oh no, I don't know. You know, I have the protest banners ready to go, and as you can imagine, a lot of them are out already and haven't come back, right? And so I am ready to make more protest banners as needed, you know. And that's the thing, is like either way, the need for protest banners will always be there, just maybe greater. You know, I actually have been starting protest garments where, like, you know, you could pull out, there's like different hidden appendages and secret pockets and stuff where you could pull out these protest banners as part of a garment. And I've been envisioning an activation performance of that with Korean traditional drummers, which actually has, like, the pungmur is used in protests historically. So I've been like dreaming of this big performance of Korean protest drummers, like with their protest garments and activating those. So yeah, but at the moment, I'm very focused on these 50 activations.
Like you said, no matter what the results are, there's always going to be a need for participation and collaboration and gestures and making.
Yeah. And also like working with non-citizen immigrant groups of color, like it's, you know, when has there ever been a time where, like, you know, we haven't had to fight and we haven't had to, like, we've had a moment of rest because like our human rights are actually like considered and upheld, you know? So
Right.
yeah, it's just exceptionally atrocious in this moment, but hopefully that will be better soon, but we will see. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your time and your research with us, Aram. We thank the audience for joining us and for sharing your questions. If you're nearby Mount Holyoke College on Monday, November 2nd from 11:30 to 1:30, you can participate in Aram's official, unofficial voting station in person. We'll be having a passive in-person table. You can cast your symbolic vote in person at the voting station table at the Mount Holyoke College Community Center lower level entrance, just outside the dining designing Commons doors. While you're there, you can learn even more about the project. You can pick up some of the ephemera, as Aram mentioned, stickers and the bracelet, as well as postcards and information to continue educating yourself and your community. Thank you so much, Aram, and thank you so much for the community for joining us. And we look forward to seeing how the project continues to be activated.
Thank you so much for having me and being my collaborator, activating the kits there at Mount Holyoke.
Thanks, Aram.